Well, quench my thirst in my quest for firsts. Hello, music fans. This is Peter Sco for Music is a Journey. I just came up with an idea for this video today. Well, actually not quite. I had an idea for one video and I was putting together an idea for another video, and then I just thought, why not put them both together? Because they're kind of related. So here's the thing. A few days ago I was on Quora and somebody was writing something about the band YNT, and that person was really passionate about the band, really into the band, had met Dave Meniketti before, and if you've seen some of my videos when I talk about 80s metal, I'm a big fan of YNT too. This is probably one of my favorite albums of theirs, and one thing that came up in my discussion with them was Dave Meniketti's guitar soloing technique, where while playing a Les Paul, he picks and at the same time he toggles the tremolo switch while playing, and it gives this really cool effect. He does it on a song on this album here. This is In Rock We Trust from 1984. He does it in a song here called Life, Life, Life. And that's the best example of it. So let's just give it a quick listen here so you know what I'm talking about. Okay. And he actually does it on the previous two albums, Mean Streak and Black Tiger. On the title track, Black Tiger, you can hear it, and also on Mean Streak. If he has done it on any other songs, I'm not sure. I notice it on those three anyway. So we were talking about this, and then the fellow said that Ace Frehley did it on the Kiss song 100,000 Years. Now, actually, that's off the debut album, which I have, and I don't remember hearing that. So I looked it up on YouTube anyway and gave it a listen, and he said it's after the drum solo. And I listened and I could not hear it. So then he said, okay, I don't have any videos of Ace doing it, but there's a video on YouTube of, I forget who now, somebody else, whoever was playing guitar in Kiss in 2007 doing it. And I watched it, and basically what he did was he played the note, and then while he's holding the note, he then flicks the switch just to cut the signal back and forth, which is not the same thing as doing that while playing. So I thought, that is just a tremolo switch toggle or toggle switch thing, which Pete Townshend did way back in 1965 on, what is it called? Anyhow, Anyway, Anywhere? Is that the order? And that brought up the idea of a lot of firsts in music, which went along with a first that I was considering of different vocal techniques, extreme vocal techniques. So I put together a list here of 10 different things, and based on the best that I can find out, these are the firsts. I'm going to put them in quotations because almost always, whenever you think someone has done something first, there's an example of someone else who's done it before. So, keeping that in mind, this is what I have for my list of 10 firsts. Okay, so first let's consider this toggle switch anyway. Who was the first person to do it? It's actually very difficult, I'm finding, to find out the answer because I don't know the name of the technique. Is it tremolo switch toggling? Is it toggle switch picking? I'm not sure. But reading the Wikipedia article about Anyhow, Anyway, Anywhere by The Who, it does state in that article there that when Pete Townshend was playing the song, when they were recording the song, he was doing these tremolo switch toggles and pick slides, pick drags, whatever you want to call them. And when that song was brought to the American company, I forget which company it was now, but anyway, the American label that was going to release the song in the US, they didn't understand what was happening, and they thought that there was problems with the recording, and they asked the band to re-record it. So that might be the first, or at least one of the first examples of flicking that toggle switch or tremolo switch, whatever you want to call it, while playing the guitar, although Pete was doing it after having played the note and then making the signal cut out and change tone for the note by doing that. Okay, but that brings up the idea of pick slides or pick drags or pick scratches, whatever you want to call them. Now this was kind of interesting because when I checked on the internet, there were actually a couple of music sites or question sites where people would ask such a question, and then a lot of people were all giving their different answers. And we got everything from Boston to Richie Blackmore to Iron Butterfly to Jimi Hendrix, to Pete Townsend, and nobody actually mentioned the song Anyway, Anyhow, Anywhere, which is the oldest one that I knew of. However, finally, as I scroll down the list, one example I found was a song by Bo Diddley called Roadrunner, and that one does indeed feature a pick slide. And that song was from 1959. So what I'm going to do is, I've got this little like a Bluetooth speaker here, and I'm just going to play it off my phone so you can get an idea what it sounds like. Let me just cue it up here. Okay, we're ready. So this is the Bo Diddley Roadrunner song from 1959, and I realize what he's doing is he's using the pick drag to give the impression of the Roadrunner, the actual Roadrunner, because from the animation series, because actually in one part of the song he does the pick slide and then he goes beep beep just like the Roadrunner. So let's just listen to that part here. I'm just playing it off my phone on the Bluetooth speaker. There it is. Okay, and that's the Roadrunner pick slide from 1959. Now the thing is that, of course, this might be the first example, or, you know, perhaps Chuck Berry did it, perhaps some other people did it before, and we're also talking about rock guitar here. Of course, the acoustic guitar had been around much, much longer, and it's very possible that acoustic guitar players did it. Some other techniques that took some time before they started being used in rock actually had first been used by acoustic guitar players from long before. So that's what I'm saying about first. You think you found the first, but it actually might not be. But anyway, let's move on to our next technique. Alright, so the next one is a very important thing in rock music and metal, and that is the bar chord. Of course, if you ever learned how to play the guitar, when you're first learning chords, you're learning those big open chords. And the bar chord is something that you want to get into if you want to play rock guitar. And quite simply, the bar chord is generally placed with usually this finger is on whatever the top string is, the lower string, and then you've got usually one or two fingers placed. I don't know why I don't just take out a guitar and show you, but probably you know anyway. But anyway, of course, one of the first, if not the first, to actually use bar chords and with distortion, this kind of distortion caused by damage to the speakers and overdrive, meaning like turning the volume way up, is Link Wray and the Raymen from way back in, what is it, 1958 or something like that, 57, 58, with the song Rumble. So after the guitar solo, you get a really nice crunchy bar chord. So let's just hit the button here and hear what that sounds like. That one. All right. So for our first use of bar chords, often it comes to Link Wray as being one of the first, if not the first. And this instrumental was called Rumble, was just so bad, it actually got banned in some states in the US. And this song is going to come up again in a little bit when we talk about another song and another technique. But let's move on to the next thing. So next we're going to take a look at distortion. Now, of course, guitar distortion, it shows up in the 1950s in the song Rocket 88, early Howlin' Wolf recordings. You get some nice buzzing, crunchy guitar sounds. Of course, Link Wray, as we heard, the Johnny Burnett Trio, and others were achieving guitar distortion, but they were doing so by either cranking up the volume beyond the speaker's capacity to, cleanly reproduce the sound of the guitar, or by actually damaging the speakers by punching it with a pencil, or in the case of Rocket 88, the speaker got damaged falling out of the car or in the rain, and they tried to fix it, hold the speaker cone in place by stuffing scrunched up newspaper behind, which gave the distorted effect. But how about the fuzz box, the actual, device that you can use to get that tone, that effect? Well, apparently the very first instance of this, at least recorded for a commercial song, happened not in a rock song, not in an upbeat, bouncy song, and not even by guitar. It appeared in a country western ballad for a bass guitar solo. So we had a fellow named Marty Robbins who recorded a song, I think late in 1960, at a recording studio in a radio station. And when it came time for the bass player to play his bit, there was this fuzzy buzzing sound that came out of the bass. So they carried on with the song, and at the end they thought, maybe we should record it. What do you think? And they listened to it and thought, let's keep that in there. Well, the engineer wasn't really pleased about the sound. He thought it was a god-awful sound, but he found out what the problem was. There was just something with the oscillator that was off. And so he thought, well, okay, just, in case anybody else thinks this is a cool sound, why don't I just make a little box where you can, flick that oscillator to either give a clean sound or a buzzing sound. And that was actually the first distortion or first fuzz box. Now the song actually became a hit on the radio in February of 1961. And let me see here. The actual name of the first fuzz box was the Maestro FZ, okay, it's American, sorry, FZ-1 fuzz tone. Now what's interesting is that the fuzz box did not become a major hit right off the bat. And 2 years later, I think it was the Ventures who recorded a song called 2,000 Pound Bumblebee, using that fuzz tone for the guitar. And it's interesting. It gives this kind of buzzing tone, that early fuzz tone sound that, shows up in the early half of the 60s sometimes. But it wasn't until 1965 when the Stones recorded I Can't Get No Satisfaction that song took off as a big hit, and suddenly the Gibson fuzz box, which was available by this time, just completely sold out. Prior to that, they said that in England there were only a couple of people who actually had one, and one of those was Jimmy Page, and he actually appears on the Who's very first commercial recording, I Can't Explain, backed by Bald Headed Woman. And if you listen to Bald Headed Woman, that opening, again, that's that distorted guitar sound using a fuzz box from late, like December 1964. But yeah, let's give a listen to Marty Robbins' that buzzing bass solo. So here it is. Like that. All right, so yeah, you can check it out for yourself if you like. That's Marty Robbins. The song is called Don't Worry. All right, let's move on to the next thing. So the next thing I want to mention is finger tapping. Actually, the tapping technique where you've got one finger holding down the string and you are hammering with this finger while alternatingly tapping with this finger. A technique, of course, made very, very famous by Edward Van Halen's Eruption instrumental off the debut album of Van Halen in 1968, and it is a phenomenal performance. If you had never heard of tapping before in your life, that certainly would have perked up your ears. Now, in this dialogue I had with this fella about YNT and about Ace Frehley of Kiss, he also mentions Ace Frehley did a tapping, but not using a finger, using the pick, which actually is something I've done myself when I was, younger and had time to sit around and play with a guitar, where, you slam the pick on the string instead, because, I don't know, gives a different sound than a finger anyway. But, of course, actually a really cool example of the hammering or finger tapping technique goes way back to Genesis, and you can hear it on their Nursery Crime album on a couple of songs, including, what's it called now? The song about the hogweed. It's one of my favorite songs from that album, and I suddenly can't remember the title. Okay, on that one. And I think it's also on the Fountain of Selmasis. You can also hear it on there. On the next album, Foxtrot, there is a fantastic example in the lengthy song Supper's Ready. And maybe I'll just sneak in a little bit of that here so you can hear it. Right? Now that is a wonderful example of the finger tapping technique going back to 1972. And I think again you can hear it on the Selling England by the Pound album, but I don't remember exactly what track. So in an interview with Steve Hackett, he said that he had joined the band and they had already been composing some of the music for Nursery Crime. And of course Tony Banks was able to play those kind of notes on the keyboard very easily. And so Steve Hackett was going to take over one of the keyboard parts, it was decided, and he thought, I can't play that. normally on a guitar. So he said that he came up with a way to be able to play that by doing that hammering and tapping technique. However, I've also heard that Alan Holdsworth has done it, and I also read somewhere that acoustic guitar musicians had also employed it in the past as well. So perhaps the very first example is in Genesis insofar as rock music goes, or perhaps somebody else was doing it earlier. If you know of an earlier example than 1971's Nursery Crime, tell me in the comments. I want to know. It's to help me quench my thirst for my quest for firsts. Is that what I'm calling this video? Alright, so let's move on to something different. How about the first bowed guitar? Alright, now once again, if you read the Wikipedia article on the technique, it does get mentioned that there were acoustic guitarists who were doing this prior to its use in rock music. The probably most famous early example is Jimmy Page, who did it not only on Led Zeppelin's debut album, but he also played a bowed guitar as far back as 1967 with the Yardbirds. And according to the video channel Pop Go the 60s, Jimmy Page started doing it in early 1967. There are other examples. For example, Pink Floyd. You can actually hear Roger Waters playing a bowed guitar a couple of times, and on the debut album, the track Lucifer Sam features a bowed bass guitar. There was also an American band from California I heard about called the Kaleidoscope. They also did it in late 66, 67. But the earliest example of a bowed guitar in rock music that I can find is played by guitarist Eddie Phillips for the British band The Creation. They had a song released in 1966, I think early 66, called Making Time. They actually existed earlier on under a different name. I've forgotten what it is now, but I think they joined up with Shall Tammy, was it? And they decided to go for a name change and then develop their sound a little bit more towards the kind of feedback style guitar playing. And so Eddie Phillips was saying that he wanted to get something with extra sustain on the guitar. Now, in the Pop Go the 60s video, the presenter says that Eddie Phillips said that the fuzzbox had not been invented yet. But it doesn't matter if it's 65 or 66. The fuzzbox had been invented. We just talked about that. It came out in early 61 or even as late 1960. So maybe the story's a little bit mixed up. Maybe Eddie Phillips didn't know about the fuzzbox. But anyway, he got the idea to use a bow on the guitar. So in Making Time, you can hear that. And let's just play a little clip from that song now. And there you have it, some of the earliest bowed guitar playing in rock music, if not the first example of it. Okay, moving on. So now I want to move on to vocal techniques, and the first one I want to talk about is early examples of really gruff, growled vocals. We know that style became popular in the late 80s as the whole death metal and death doom metal sounds became popular. Bands like Autopsy, Morbid Angel, Immolation, of course over in Britain with My Dying Bride, Paradise Lost, all sorts of bands were using that really gruff vocal technique, which has now basically been called the death growl vocal style. But I want to mention two early examples of this. First, we go to a band called Zior, whose debut album was actually, the album cover was shot by the same photographer who shot the album cover for Black Sabbath's debut. Now, their second album was called Every Inch a Man, and the opening track, I've since forgotten the name. It's something about the devil. I don't remember what. I actually have the download, I think. iTunes download. But anyway, it is a heavy, early 70s, heavy psychedelic type song, and the vocals are completely incomprehensible. I don't know what the guy's saying. I don't even know if he's actually saying anything. But what I'm going to do is just play it off my phone here again from YouTube, just so you can hear what it sounds like. I think he said holiday in there somewhere. Not sure. But okay, now there's actually an even earlier example going back to 1964, which you might know of. This was a band from Minneapolis called the Novas, and they recorded a song called The Crusher, which featured a wrestler doing the vocals. And just a moment here, I'm going to find it. So it looks like the wrestler's name was Reggie Lazowski. And yeah, actually, I had the song queued up. I was just looking for the wrestler's name. But let's just give a listen to The Crusher by the Novas with Reggie Lazowski on vocals.
Hey, do the hammerlock. I do the hammerlock.
Yeah.
Do the hammerlock, you turkey necks.
Do the hammerlock, you turkey necks. I mean, so many death metal songs these days start with the vocalist coming in doing a "Rrrr," and there's this guy doing it in 1964. Pretty cool. All right, I want to move on to another vocal technique now. This is the black metal screech, as it is sometimes called. So one of the absolute best examples of this, and probably the earliest example I can find, is by a band called the Cro-Magnons, and they released an album in 1969. It was given the title, I think it's Cave Rock, but the original title was Orgasm. It is quite an eclectic and experimental album, and honestly, I don't have it simply because most of the album is just not exactly listening pleasure for me. However, the song that I really do dig and the song that stands out is the opening track called Caledonia. Now it begins with somebody playing with a radio dial and a brass band playing, which kind of sometimes goes a little wonky, and then we hear some crickets chirping, and then the song goes in doing this. Pretty exciting. Now check out the vocals. Here we go. Okay, so we've got bagpipes in there, we've got distorted guitar, we've got this, tribal rhythmic drum beat really pounding, and we've got these utterly screamed vocals. Like, this is what would become popular years down the road, and yet these guys were doing that in 1969. Unfortunately, unfortunately, there were just so many experimental things people were doing back then that if somebody did it once, they probably wouldn't do it again, and then somebody else would say, well, that's already been done, so I'm going to do something different. Unlike these days, where if somebody does something, everybody's like, that's cool, I'm going to do it too. So anyway, that is Cro-Magnon and the song Caledonia. Check it out on YouTube. You got to skip ahead about a minute or so until you get into that boom, 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 boom rhythm. But there it is. All right, now I want to talk about the inhaled scream. This is a technique that has been coming out in extreme metal more, because if you just put your voice or your mouth really close to the microphone and inhale a scream, you can get a pretty blood-curdling sound out of your voice. So people are doing that a lot. Also the kind of so-called pig squeals, all sorts of vocal techniques coming out in metal music. Boy, aren't metal musicians really creative. However, one of the earliest examples, if not the earliest that I can find, goes back to 1968 with a track called Careful With That Axe, Eugene by Pink Floyd. Yes, that's right. You can hear Roger Waters doing an inhaled scream on that track. And there are some live performances where it is just even more explosive and way cooler. There is a live in Pompeii version, which is really wicked, but there's also one, I think it's live at Brighton Dome, and that is my favorite version because the song goes absolutely to hell at this point. It is a very slow, that kind of spacey Pink Floyd feel from the early 70s, and then there's just this boom boom with the drums, and in the video, flames leap up and the song just goes ballistic, and Roger Waters is really pulling off that inverted scream there. So I just want to play that little bit. Maybe I'll show you the video at the same time. I love that. That just gives me chills. That is so cool. Every time I hear it, man, I wish I had that version on CD. That is so wicked. Anyway, that is the inverted scream. And actually, you can hear another example of it on 10 Years After's 1970 album Cricklewood Green. The final track is, what is it now? If the Sun Forgets to Shine? Something like that. And at the very end, as the song is wrapping up and the guitar's going all crazy, there's a wicked Alvin Lee guitar solo, he makes this kind of parrot sound, like this rah, 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 like that. And after that, he just lets out that kind of scream, and it's just fading out. So you get it in the last 2-3 seconds of the song as it fades out. It is one hell of a scream, and I think there is no way Alvin Lee is doing that with the voice, the air coming out. I am pretty darn sure he is drawing it in, but it's pretty damn cool. Okay, while we're on to extreme vocal styles, and are we coming up to the last one? I think we are. This is the last one to talk about. This is the sludge metal sound. And I actually have this on CD, so I can play a sample here. One of the earliest, if not the earliest examples of sludge metal sound is a song recorded by Cactus. Now, it was not released on any of their regular albums. I think it was a B-side or a studio outtake that later on showed up on compilation albums. But it is a song called Rumblin' Man, which is based on Link Wray's Rumble. It is the same chord sequence, but it is just totally balls to the wall volume and bombast. And Rusty Day, the vocalist, is just really giving a very harsh and gruff vocalization of the lyrics. So let me just play a little sample here off my iTunes library.
2 days of baby now, I'm in no neighborhood.
How about that? Pretty damn wicked. Okay, and that actually wraps up my list, I think. So we got the first growled vocals, actually The Crusher, the song by the Novas. We have the first screamed vocals, like black metal screech vocals with Cro-Magnon and the song Caledonia. We have the first sludge type vocals, like proto-sludge with Cactus and the song Rumblin' Man. And we have the first inhaled scream of Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. First bowed guitar in rock music, probably The Creation with Eddie Phillips doing that. First tapping, probably Steve Hackett, maybe Alan Holdsworth. If you know anybody else that did it earlier, let me know. First tremolo switch toggling, probably Pete Townsend of The Who in 1965 for Anyway, Anyhow, Anywhere. If you know of an earlier one, let me know. You know, a lot of these guys in the 50s may have also been experimenting with that stuff because they were doing like the overdriven distortion sound and all sorts of new guitar techniques. So they may have been doing pick slides and toggle switch stuff then too. So if you know of it, please tell me. First bar chords seem to go to Link Wray, and wonderfully done so with that, crunchy guitar distortion. And as well, we have the first fuzz tone recording, that country song by Marty Robbins. Now, I realize there's one thing I forgot to mention, which is neither vocals nor guitar. It is the first horns. All right, now we know Ronnie James Dio is famous for doing it, and he said that it was his grandma who did it to ward off the evil eye. Ronnie James Dio being of American-Italian heritage. Gene Simmons, he tried to take credit for it, to say that he was the first. But Gene Simmons' approach was to do this, not this. So who was the first to do this, at least in a rock music sense? Earliest example I can find actually goes back to 1969. Take a look at the album by Coven, a 1969 album called Witchcraft Destroys Minds and Reaps Souls. Coven were an actual confessed satanic band. And what's the name of that guy now? Anton McVeigh or something like that. The guy who started the Church of Satan in the United States. He actually started giving this sign, the horns. And on the back of Coven's 1969 album, there is a picture of the band. And take a look at what a couple of the members are doing in that picture. They are throwing the horns. Now, Coven's style of music was not particularly heavy, although it was, written by a bunch of True Blood Satanists, a vocalist. Her name is Jinx, anyway. Apparently her father was a member of the Church of Satan, and she was along with it. The final track on the album, I don't have it, but the final track on the album is a 13-minute track of a satanic ritual. Yeah. They actually have a song on the album called Black Sabbath. Remember, this is 1969. Actually, 1969, Earth changed their name to Black Sabbath. But we're talking about England and California, so it's not likely they knew each other. But the bass player in Coven's, his name was Oz Osborne. So that's also kind of coincidental, isn't it? All right, and that wraps up my list of, is it 10 or is it 11? Depends if you count toggles and pick slides as two separate things. But there you go. That's a list of a bunch of firsts that I have, potential firsts. Know of any more? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and catch you in the next video soon. Bye all.